Classic rock band the Beatles arrived in the United States for the first time in 1964, early in the group's lifetime, but George Harrison claimed they were a bit naive. Once the group secured their first number, one hit in the U.S., which happened to be I Want to Hold Your Hand, they planned a short trip that included what became a record-breaking appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show. Their arrival on February 7th sparked the beginning of the British invasion, and the amount of fans that came out to welcome them to the U.S. was off the charts. However, according to Harrison, despite the phenomenon going on around them, the Beatles didn't fully feel the pressure, having been riding on their previous success and naivety. Speaking to Crawdaddy magazine in 1977, Harrison explained about feeling the pressure. "Oh yeah, we did. But we knew we'd had sufficient success in Europe and Britain to have a bit of confidence. And we really needed a hell of a lot of confidence for the States because it was such an important place. I mean, nobody'd ever made it, British acts, apart from the odd singer like Lonnie Donegan. But Ed Sullivan was, everybody had told us how he was really big. But again, we were pretty naive to certain things, so that helped at the time. I remember them asking us, did we know who Walter Cronkite was? And I said, I don't know, isn't he somebody on the television? Things like that were good because they all had fun, the people asking questions, and the press us being naive and not seeming to care about that sort of thing. Crawdaddy asked if there was ever a tendency to still act naive after you wised up, to which Harrison replied, I don't know. But by that time, we'd got into that whole sort of routine that we used to have, at press conferences. A lot of it was just nervous energy, just for jokes and stuff which everybody seemed to like. That was one of the big helps for the Beatles at the time. If anybody dried up in the press conferences, there was always somebody else there with a smart answer. There was always a good balance, so nobody could ever really quite nail us. Harrison said going on The Ed Sullivan Show was just the climax to the Beatles' whole America thing. In retrospect, he added, it probably wouldn't have mattered what we'd done on The Sullivan Show. It was like already established by the previous press that had gone before. But that was a long time ago. The press wanted something from the group just as much as the massive crowds of fans did. Like Harrison said, they tried to get a witty remark or something else out of them that they could use to sell hundreds of newspapers. According to George Harrison on George Harrison Interviews and Encounters, Harrison said that most of the Beatles' interviews were boring, and in order to survive them, the group used to make inside jokes about the reporters. Were you bored by all that? A television host asked him in 1988 of the band's seemingly unending interview circuit. Harrison responded, well, sometimes it was boring, sometimes we'd just make fun of them. We'd have our own little in-jokes, to get through. It's like a survival kind of thing.